Welcome everybody to this month's Startup Grind event. For those of you who are here for the first time, a little explanation of who we are here at Startup Grind. We are a global organisation and we have over 600 chapters worldwide, 400 cities, over 3 million people such as yourself that are interested in entrepreneurs, whether you're building your own startup, whether you're working for or working with and supporting. We exist to educate, to inspire, and to connect entrepreneurs around the world. Now, here at Startup Grind, what we believe in, we've got a few core values. We believe in, first and foremost, making friends, not connections. We believe in, if you're doing like all the people you meet here today, instead of it being your standard, perhaps, networking event where it's like, hi, nice to meet you, shake hands, have a business card, okay, cool, see you later. Spend a little more time, getting to know people, getting to know how you can help them, how they might be able to help you. And it's kind of what we believe is you give before you take and you help others before you help yourself. Because with this whole ecosystem, we're all just trying to build great things. What goes around comes around, and genuinely, we believe at Startup Grind is the best way to do it. I want to also say, moving on, I want to give a huge thank you to CMS for supporting everything we do here at Startup Grind. I'm going to pass you over to David Dennis, who's going to tell you a little more about fantastic things that CMS offers entrepreneur people. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Johnny. So CMS is delighted to have Startup Grind here. We're very keen to be active in the Scottish startup scene. We, as an introduction, are a full-service law firm. We do everything from property through to litigation, corporate through to employment, and my particular favourite, technology. So we start with companies that are just an idea and advise them right the way through to public listing on the London Stock Exchange and so on. So really right the way through the life cycle. I particularly enjoy working with startups because it means you're working directly with founders and really at the heart of the business. And it's CMS as a way of making sure that we can work with the best and the brightest of the startups. We have a program called Equip. So if you are interested in that, or it might be relevant to you or your projects, if you Google CMS Equip, that'll be all the information you need. Essentially, we are on the lookout for IP-rich, exciting startups in Scotland. And then if they come in and have a talk to us, we'll see if we can help them out with various incentives like reduced rates, introductions to other people in the industry, fixed price products like an IP health check or online terms and conditions, things that we think might be useful for an early stage company. So that's how we like to stay involved, and if that's relevant to anyone, then do get in touch. But for now, back to Johnny and to Chris.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Yeah, so as I say, a huge thank you to CMS for supporting everything we do. A thank you as well to Heroku, as you can see behind us, have sponsored Startup Grind globally for our Product and Engineering month. So we've had a lot of events like these where exactly like Heroku as a platform as a service offer, really help support, technologists, product design and everything to do with that. So a huge thank you for them for making this possible as well. But now on to the main part of the event, the reason you're all here. I want to introduce Chris Stafford. Now Chris came from, originally came from a psychology degree, originally went into kind of banking and learned the technology while there, gained an interest, a lot of passion and interest for it, and then went on to do artificial intelligence over at the University of Edinburgh, where I believe you met a few people that would go on to be very, important in the life as you try your hand at startups and went from Goobit to HubDub and to this little old startup called FanDuel, which over the course, starting with 5 founders in the room, and then went on to have a well over 200, huge staff base, and sold to Paddy Power for over $500 million. So we're super, super fortunate to have a fantastic Chris Stafford with us. So let's do a nice warm Startup Grind welcome. Yeah, thanks very much for being with us here today, Chris.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess to start off, that was like a very brief intro. I feel like I've skipped over so many important parts. So how do you kind of like how did it all come about? How did you end up in the world of startups like you have?
Well, actually, you covered quite a lot of it. It was a philosophy degree, not a psychology.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
So, you know, basically getting into tech from there was something I'd always been interested in. And I joined Halifax in the pre-HBOS days.
Mm-hmm.
They had a great graduate development scheme. And yeah, so basically got taken around the whole tech environment in a large company.
Mm-hmm.
We were actually quite a dynamic large company that were doing interesting things at the time, almost uniquely so for a bank. And so that kind of gave me a feel for getting stuff done, and also just being able to make things happen at some scale. So if you had a good idea, we could actually turn it round and it would be in front of, you know, a few tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of working from there, I went into AI at Edinburgh University, and as you mentioned, Edinburgh was a great course, and there's about 120 people on the course.
Do we have a working mic? Maybe not.
Yeah, there's a possibility.
Yeah, that might be gone. Yeah, no, sorry about that. Yeah.
So there's about 120 people on the course, one of whom was a guy called Tom Griffiths. So after the course finished, or a little after the course finished, I did a little bit of travelling immediately, as you should do. And,
I like that plan.
You know, startups are fun, but pretty all-encompassing if you want to do anything else first.
Yeah.
So getting back from that, it's that kind of, what am I going to do next? Do I want to go and get the same job I already had a year ago back, or do I want to do something different? And Tom was involved in setting up a startup called Group It with a friend from home, that was Rob. And they were looking for somebody with a bit more technical chops to get things moving there. So the three of us basically set up, and we actually launched Group It in 2006, I think.
Okay, yeah.
To a very limited user base. As with most startup ideas, it maybe had some legs, but needed a lot of iteration. And so we were kind of looking at it going, do we carry on with this? How are we going to kind of radically change this to be an interesting idea?
Yeah, of course.
And actually at that time, Nigel came along with his own idea and said, do my idea, guys, it's better. And we kind of looked at it and went, it's not wrong. So basically we'd actually just got an agreement to do an angel funding round for Group It. And so we slightly tentatively went back to Kevin, our angel lead, and said, we'd still very much like your money, but we're not that inclined to go with the idea. And Kevin, very forward thinking, his immediate answer was, actually, I didn't think much of the idea either. And I was really investing in the team, which was kind of a vote of confidence.
Absolutely, yeah.
So basically we were able to roll over the money, start immediately working on this idea that Nigel had come up with, which was a site called HubDub, so still not FanDuel, which basically, so that was a news prediction game. It had got a degree of immediate mass market appeal and something that looked like a vaguely real business plan attached. And we were able to take that and launch it in Palm Springs to a mildly adoring worldwide audience.
Oh.
We were still not at any epic scale, but we were suddenly talking about a few tens of thousands of users rather than a couple of hundred.
Yeah, your
users.
gran and your family and your mum and that kind of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. She didn't go looking. But yeah, so we launched that, and that was good enough to get us to our initial round of funding, Series A with I was going to say Penfold, Pentech.
Yep.
So yeah, basically, and well, I'll go on from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Questions go on.
No, indeed, yeah. It's an interesting story, and this is more about the early days. What was it like whenever you were making the decision to go back to, say, a large bank and that kind of thing, to a startup? What was the thought process around that decision and deciding you're going to go for, work with this team?
I'd love to say that I was driven by a kind of passion and that I wanted to change the world and many of those things. But if I'm honest, a lot of it was just that kind of, I don't want to go straight back into corporate life and just want to try something out. It probably won't work, but actually, weirdly, in the startup world, kind of failing is more acceptable than it is anywhere else.
Exactly, yeah.
So actually, it was kind of an opportunity to stay current, stay employed, do something slightly different, and almost in a lower risk environment personally than a corporate job would have been. Obviously, the kind of situation isn't the same for anybody who's got a family to support or anything else, but you pick your right time in life to do it, and it can be a really good thing to do.
Absolutely. So see, if we're talking, whenever you're first getting into technology or something, you did mention that it was an area of interest, but then you did take philosophy. What was the transition like as you sort of learned initially, probably from the very start, software development, products, development and all this kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I guess there's two factors there. One is that I had been coding my entire life.
So
it wasn't entirely alien. I'd just never gone through the academic sphere. I think the other thing there is that this is going back quite a few years, more than I'd care to mention. And when you look at the academic courses that were available at the time, you might learn to write code, you might learn some complex facts about algorithms, but nobody was really going to teach you about software development.
Indeed, yeah.
So actually, learning that from scratch without thinking I knew it was quite beneficial.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
And I'd say, as I say, it was a graduate training scheme, but actually it was exactly the right organisation for me, at least at the time.
Okay. And would you say, it sounds like you did benefit from starting at a large corporate before jumping into the more kind of small business space. Would you say that really helped, or?
I think kind of comparing my attitude to things with perhaps other people I've talked to who have gone more directly into the space or spent time in perhaps academia before going in. I think it gives you a degree of confidence. Maybe takes away some of the imposter syndrome that everybody else is doing it properly, and you just sit there going, actually, to a large extent, large corporations are a bunch of bored people in an office half-arsing it. The idea that you as a startup are not doing anything correctly it's just not necessarily correct.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so you're getting established, and then it comes about where you have a semi-successful product. What was the thought process that then led to the pivot that became obviously FanDuel, Fantasy Sports?
So I guess where we were with HubDub was we launched in very start of 2008, and you may or may not remember that it was a small financial situation.
Tiny situation, obviously.
Around that time.
Yeah.
So there was not quite on the same scale as 2000, but there was a that kind of burst in the tech bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Most importantly, for the type of product we were trying to launch, was that ad rates absolutely cratered.
Right.
Suddenly you could get about a tenth as much for advertising on your site as you could a year before.
Right.
So we were very much a business model that depended on getting lots and lots of views on pages and showing lots and lots of adverts.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, suddenly you haven't got a business model.
Yeah, it's a bit problematic.
So, you know, that obviously made us reconsider where we were.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in practice, things probably hadn't gone quite as well as the optimistic predictions, but I think that was also very much expected at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we kind of looked at it and went, what we really need is an actual revenue stream. You know, we need people to be paying us to do something this kind of if you build it, they will come mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Probably wasn't working anywhere anymore, and it certainly wasn't working in Scotland, where investors are.
Let's just say they're a lot more conservative, perhaps.
They understand the concept of a bottom line.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. It's not a WeWork situation.
And so yeah, we kind of looked at it and went like, well, what out of what we're currently doing are people really interested in? Where are we getting the engagement? And how can we get them to give us money? And given the kind of focus on the US market, the problem wasn't just where will they willingly give us money, it was a question of where will they legally give us money. So basically, working through all the various options, we focused in very quickly on sport. You know, that was easily our most popular category within HubDub.
Yep.
And while none of us were ever huge sports fans, it was an area of interest.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, we got that, and then it was just that kind of case of working through legal models, hit on fantasy sports as being something you can do.
Yep.
And really, we just kind of sat there and went, well, what's our niche going to be? How are we going to make this an interesting product?
Yeah, indeed. And yeah, how important do you think it is to have like a niche, particularly, you know, if we're talking like, you know, first target market and then expanding wider than that, how important is it to have that initial focus, if you like?
I think it's important to have a hook, and it's important to have something that's going to guide your thinking. In terms of kind of exactly what we thought that niche was going to look like, it's probably not what we did. We actually kind of the initial product was we know this is legal, but we also know other people are doing it. So what are we going to do that's different and edgy that's going to make us stick out? And what we did was too edgy, and yeah, we got some traction, but we weren't getting any real interest. And actually, most of the interest was going like, this is a fun game, but can't you make it look a lot more like everybody else's games? So yeah, it's kind of interesting that the niche is important and it's motivational, but actually it's not going to be where you end up.
Oh yeah, naturally. So can we if we transition now more towards some thoughts on actually building up, you know, you also started by building the whole, effectively the tech stack that, you know, sat underneath, you know, HubDub, obviously FanDuel. Like, what's your thoughts on always be shipping, always be like putting out versus like building to scale, like building, like what's your thoughts between the two and what's the trade-offs?
I think getting stuff out there is important. And I think not being scared of things like downtime is also important. You've got to be able to say sorry.
Right. Okay.
At the end of the
Yeah.
day. Because you're not going to get everything right. And honestly, there are a lot of things which, working in a bank, we did in terms of making damn sure nothing was going wrong from day one. I understand banks have kind of stopped.
Yeah.
In the past, but when we put a product live in the bank, then it was going to work.
It just straight up.
And it wasn't going to
No
break
ifs and
anything
buts,
else.
yes.
There was months of testing involved in making sure that was the case.
Yeah.
When you're trying to iterate a product, you don't really know what's working. You want to do some tests. You want feedback from users. You can't do that.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely. So just speaking of testing and that kind of thing, what level of engineering maturity do you think you should expect in a somewhat early stage startup, and how many people should have running tests, how frequently, what kind of coverage should you have?
Okay, I mean, one thing I'd say is that even in the time we've been doing, since we started GroupIt, the field of software engineering has matured a lot.
Naturally, yeah.
And so, honestly, we took more risks than you would take now because it's kind of free not to.
Yeah.
The expectation absolutely should be that you are following coherent development practices, that you're writing unit tests, that at a certain level you've got a good level of confidence that your code's going to run when you put it live. What you don't necessarily need to do is run through kind of multiple stages with manual testers or too much in the way of focus groups. You want to get the code live without that kind of 10-week deployment.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the perks of being a startup, is being able to move a lot more quickly than large organizations like the banks, where things need to work, whenever it goes live. I should say, at this point, if anyone has questions throughout, on any particular topics, or particularly if it's more focused to where the conversation is at the moment, feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to ask. I'm currently non-technical, I'm trying to improve that, trying to learn, but I guarantee there's some people who can ask, far more, informative questions, perhaps related to exactly, what you're currently facing in your businesses and your kind of career cycle at the moment. So if you have questions at any point, go ahead, Jude.
You mentioned imposter syndrome. There's so much more research coming out that imposter syndrome is real. How did you guys tackle that and kind of go over it to get to where you were?
Well, to some extent, it was, as I said, the fact that I'd got reasonable corporate history. Nigel had been through the mill. So Nigel's background was in consulting with McKinsey, and if anything's going to give you perhaps too much confidence, consulting for McKinsey is that sets you up with a great network and a real feel that you are the most informed person in the room.
Are they right?
Often the case, sadly. And Leslie had a background in consultancy as well. Tom and Rob were perhaps more fresh out of uni. But at the end of the day, as founders, I don't know if it was something that was an enormous issue for us.
Okay.
I think at later stages, as you're kind of expected to have a degree of specialism, realizing that you're in a job kind of because you set it up, and that you might be able to hire somebody who's got more immediate experience, it starts to kick in a little bit. I think you address it through coaching and through gaining that reassurance, talking to people, and I guess maybe learning to believe them when you get the feedback, and the feedback is that you're good.
Yeah.
That's the tough part, learning to believe them.
100%, and I can only speak from my experience of imposter syndrome, and I know that other people suffer much more severely from it and find it harder to gain that comfort that they are as good as they need to be.
Yeah, so thinking about like as FanDuel starts to grow and that kind of thing, what are your thoughts on like how did you make your first hires, what kind of things you look for both on a technical skill point and also on a soft skill point? How was that early stage of building a team and what are your thoughts on that area?
So to an extent, I'm sure anybody who's kind of done hiring in a startup will sort of agree the first hires are the people you can actually convince to work for you. So that kind of it's not an easy sell, and there are, particularly on the technical side, there just are not a lot of people to go around. You struggle if you don't have a technical co-founder already, then finding the technical co-founder is a battle, and then actually finding people who want to work for you can be very tough indeed. I guess once we got past that, then really the main focus for me has always been on building an effective team. So there's two aspects to that. One is who have I already got, and what do I need to kind of make them more productive? How will they work with the people I've already got? But it's also will they effectively work as a team, or are they, as is quite common in the tech sphere, they kind of this kind of hero in their own mind mindset, which you can work with, but you've got to manage. But yeah, really, it's kind of about looking at everybody you get an application from and saying, what can this person bring? Can we use this, and can we use it now? But just you're trying to get the best from what you can get, and what you can get is strictly limited. Yeah,
of course, absolutely. What's your thoughts on, like, say, hiring someone with a lot of experience versus hiring somebody who's fresh out of university or fresh out of something like Code Clan or that kind of thing?
I think you've got to have enough experience. Fresh out of uni is, in a lot of ways, quite equivalent to fresh out of Code Clan, but actually just with a bit more length, it can give you something slightly different. But I think, at the end of the day, those people are junior people, and what's most important is to make sure that they've got somebody to learn from. What you can't do is hire a room full of people from Code Clan, from uni, and expect anything good to happen.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's not good for you, and it's not good for them. And increasingly, they won't take the job. There's a lot of competition for those guys as well. Guys, gender choice there, but there's a lot of competition for those people as well. So they are looking for a team where they can learn and build their skill set and build their careers. So tech recruiting is absolutely more of a two-way street than anything I've seen before in terms of recruitment.
Yeah, because there's so much power. Well, there's so many options. I remember seeing a statistic where there's there's 5 open tech roles for every one truly qualified, software developer. It's genuinely, very tricky. We talked for a moment about the coaching. How would you put that in place? How did you, whenever you're growing the team, put that in place to make sure there was somebody to mentor, to learn from?
I'm not going to pretend we were perfect at it. And to a large extent, I guess we probably didn't initially. We were quite lucky with our first couple of hires. Again, I think it harks back to launching into the middle of a financial crisis. There were a few good people
floating around, unemployed.
kind of available and
Yeah.
willing to go through a kind of actual interview process.
Yeah.
So by the time we were trying to expand the pool of people, we got a couple of people on board. Obviously it helps that I was on the team, and I'm not going to say I'm the greatest tech genius in the world, but I'm not terrible. I've at least managed to convince people at interview that I am somebody they can learn something from.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of formal process, I think it's something that we didn't do enough of.
Right. Okay.
And we were at least aware of that. You know, for example, we wanted to put in a graduate scheme, and we recognised that we were not in a position to do the mentoring that was necessary for that.
Right. I see.
At various stages. But yeah, I mean, essentially, it's less about having a formal program, particularly if your tech team is less than 50, perhaps less than 100 people, then you know, if you think of a formal program, it's kind of going from team to team to team, talking to the right people in a structured way, and actually you're going to find that your people are going to do that naturally, because you've only got about 5 teams.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But what you do need to do is make sure that all your teams are configured with the right mix of new people and experience, and just encourage and motivate your senior people to want to mentor the junior people, and give them advice and feedback. Yeah. Which not all senior people are, and so it's that kind of, you've got to make it part of their job. Okay. Yeah. And as if they don't do that feedback, then you had great code, but you didn't actually do your job.
Yeah. Yeah. So with what was I going to say? What are some of the challenges that emerge as you watch the team grow from a couple of people in a room to the 2 pizza groups to at some point like 100 plus? What are some of the challenges that emerge, and how do you kind of get over as you scale?
I think the first challenge is at about I guess 10 people really. Until that point, you can honestly run as a single team, and you can have everybody in a daily stand-up. Fundamentally, everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Yeah. To some extent. So immediately, you can't do that anymore. You've got a whole new layer of management. So you've got to have more team leads, and you've got to find a way of making, at the very least, the team leads talk to each other. Of course, yeah. But most importantly, it's not at the formal management level. It's not about the ceremonies. Right. I think fundamentally, the various ceremonies in development are not their daily stand-up. It's not there because having a daily stand-up where these 3 questions are answered by everybody is a worthwhile activity. It's about the fact that everybody talk to each other. Yeah. So fundamentally, what you've got to do is try and keep up an atmosphere where, as far as possible, as many people as possible are talking to as many other people as possible. And have just got an overall idea of what's happening. Because with the best formal process in the world, you won't catch those kind of 2 people are working on the same problem, or this piece is fundamentally incompatible with this piece. Yeah. So basically, it becomes a case of going, what are the social events, what are the office layout, what are the what meetings do we have to make up and call a ceremony that we need to do to keep that open interaction happening.
See, I think that's a really interesting space as well, and it kind of transitions on to something that I'm really interested to talk to you about. How do, with a team, as we go, or as many software firms becoming, partially outsourced, more freelancers, more remote work, how do you, or in your thoughts, how would you maintain that kind of everybody talking to each other if everyone's not necessarily in the same space?
Yeah, it's interesting. As you say, I mean, a huge amount of the work I'm doing now is remote, and actually just started in the last couple of weeks with a new team who are remote in Glasgow and London. So actually, one of the first things I did was before I came to this, stopped off and found a Glasgow contingent and had a coffee with them. I think it's a challenge fundamentally. We initially kind of had everybody in the office. Or one extremely devoted person who was able to manage their expectations and kind of, if they weren't included, so we always had a degree of working from home, so it was kind of in the office 2-3 days a week.
Okay.
But that in itself isn't always easy to manage, but the first kind of more remote person we had was based in Amsterdam.
Okay, right.
But he was an experienced freelancer. He'd been around and he knew exactly how to pipe up.
When he needs to.
And actually, one of the great things was hiring a couple of people like that. We learned an enormous amount about how to make those things happen.
Okay,
But I mean, at the end of the day, there are a lot of tools out there, but you've just got to keep working all the tools until you find the one that works, which is different for different people and different for different teams. And you've got to make sure you work it every day. It's that kind of, you can't, you've maybe got a meeting, maybe that hasn't happened for whatever reason, but every day, you've got a list of all the people you've got to say hello to. Grab them into the chat, have a general chat that's not work related, and encourage people to just talk rubbish. That's absolutely key, because they'll talk rubbish for a bit and then they'll actually talk about work.
I guess that's the big part that is potentially missing from remote work is the chat, like you described, over the office whenever something happens. Something that Daniel brought up, I was speaking to him earlier about this, is as a developer, having, whenever you finish some code and you click run and it does run, you have that little yes win, whereas normally you turn around and be like, hey, look what you can't necessarily have that as easily anyway with truly remote working, I guess. So.
I mean, the collaboration tools for tech development are fantastic in comparison to some other areas. You're inherently immediately sharing source code. You've got, while I've not had an actual server that we owned, I don't know if I ever have actually. But everything that you just deployed is somewhere in America already. So getting somebody else to look at it is relatively easy. And it's absolutely inherent. You don't get to deploy code without somebody seeing the code, signing the code off. So we've kind of got a few inbuilt advantages in the tech sphere. I think outside of that, it's really just finding what works and figuring out when you've got to move from one thing to another. So you end up, everything starts on email. And then you realise you've got to have a chat. So you start on the chat, and then there's some stuff on chat, some stuff on email. And then it's like, actually, this could do with being a document. But with all of that, the collaboration tools are there. And actually, in many ways, it's better than being in the same room and not talking.
I guess,
That's in the same office, as long as you work it every day. And as long as you encourage people to understand the difference for them. If they're working from home, then it can be a lonely place to be. You need to, I always recommend kind of co-working spaces, or at the very least coffee shops.
Absolutely.
Get out, see some faces, say hello. Your cat doesn't count.
Do we have any questions from the room at the moment about this or any other topics? No, we'll keep rolling through. So,
I do have
oh, sorry, yeah. Go on.
Just when regarding FanDuel, when you're scaling up and becoming larger and larger, how did you find it was delegating jobs that you used to do to other people? Did you struggle with that initially, and if so, how did you overcome the struggles?
I think the main struggle is it doesn't occur to you for a long time, and then obviously there's trust issues. There's the I think everybody tends to go through a phase of going, I can just do this myself quicker, or just that kind of honesty about it's a 5-minute job when actually it's 1,000 5-minute jobs. It's quite difficult to remember to let go. I think some people find it emotionally difficult to let go of work that they've been invested in themselves. One thing I'd recommend for that is not really liking any of the work you've done in the past. Maybe that speaks to imposter syndrome. But if you're in a scrappy startup and you're on the code side, you're going to have written a lot of code which is absolute rubbish. That was just knocked together in 15 minutes to solve a problem there and then, and is doing something it really shouldn't at 10 times the scale. And I think having a great deal of emotional investment in that code, it's easier not to. But certainly, there's been the odd thing where I've kind of struggled. You go, it's my baby. I don't want to let it go, and I know other people who are perhaps more passionate about different things do struggle more with that. But at the end of the day, I think if there's a lot of pressure on, a lot you need to get done, and you have got people willing to do the work for you, then you'd have to be pretty nuts not to let them. But yeah, I appreciate it can be very difficult, and it varies by role, I think.
Thank you.
So was it really easy for you to keep the people you hired, like the first core team? Because if you're in a successful startup, you always have good prospects coming in, and if not, like how are you keeping them? Not just the money. Yeah.
No, well, it's honestly something that for a long time we never struggled with, and but it's always difficult to really identify whether we did something right, whether we were lucky, or what. But even now, actually, FanDuel's got it had a phase when things were a bit tough, where turnover was perhaps a bit higher. And there were some redundancies. But even now, the kind of core team has got fairly low turnover. And I'd like to think that we created an environment that people really like to stay in. And a lot of the people I'm still in touch with will say, it was the happiest place they worked, or the most interesting place they worked. So, I guess in that respect we were doing some things right. I would say in terms of money that if you are trying to win people over with money, you've kind of already lost. You've got to pay a fair wage. And at the end of the day, if you don't, people will go somewhere where they can do better for themselves. But, you can't offer somebody an extra 20 grand over what they're worth and expect them to stay. It's if they're going at that point.
And I'm interested a little bit in the investment journey, and you mentioned Kevin. Was he from a particular syndicate, or who was Kevin?
Oh, sorry, Kevin Doran was, I feel terrible, I can't remember the name of the company.
But was it like a private equity firm?
He was an angel investor. He was at some point the CEO of kind of one of those internet maybe even slightly pre-internet technology firms that went to the US and made it fairly big. So he personally was doing some angel stuff on his own account, but ended up working not really in a formal syndicate. But he was kind of the first contact. In fact, Ian Ritchie, I think, probably led the syndicate as such from there
Oh, it
on
was
in.
Ian,
Ian,
yeah.
yeah, the on previous talk. Yeah.
I mean, Ian obviously has done the rounds with dozens of companies and really loves doing that.
Yeah.
And Ian kind of stayed with us as an investor through the whole journey,
Yeah.
where the other angels mostly kind of went in for the first round and maybe the second round, and then it's kind of, well, you're kind of not talking angel money anymore.
Here, Ian, do you have a spare 50 million in your back pocket? Yeah, sure.
Is that really? Should pickpocket you. So yeah, I mean, and that really was a case of, if I'm honest, not me, but Tom and Nigel were both very active at turning up to this kind of event and perhaps more technical events and kind of working the room. And so...
To raise money now, you mean?
Well, honestly, no. It's about meeting
Just
people.
marketing.
Because sure, it's good to meet people who can invest directly, but at the same time, half the time you're meeting somebody who happens to know somebody, and you know that's everybody who's willing to listen to you talk about your company is probably worth talking to. And,
Well, yeah, absolutely. So on to an area, as I say, I think is quite interesting. Like, tell me, is there any at the moment now, like post FanDuel with like Amber 80 and everything? Is there any like technologies that are really of interest to you? Sectors, ideas? What do you think is exciting now, looking forward to the next 5-10 years?
well, I looked through my client list earlier on, trying to figure out what they'd approve of me saying. No, I mean, I think technology-wise, I wouldn't say I'm jaded because I'm still excited by every new technology I see. I'm ridiculous. I'm in no sense a full-stack developer, but I'll play badly with almost everything I can find. I think, you know, what interests me is kind of doing something useful. And I think, you know, it's a frustration that in a lot of ways the technology sector and startup sector is focused more and more on doing things that are not only not useful but probably actively bad. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to kind of hold your head up as a technologist and say, actually, we're the good guys. So, you know, it's that kind of, I don't want to be a disruptor, especially if, as a company, I've got a genuinely better way of doing something that is going to transform the space, then that's absolutely wonderful, and that will give people something new. But if my model is I'm going to swallow up the market and then ramp up prices, then you know,
Doesn't sit right, yeah.
it's not cool.
Yeah. I think in the next 5-10 years are going to have a big influence. We talked a little about remote work, and we'll see more of that come through. Is there any other kind of areas that have, you know, that intrigue you that you think is going to be a way forward?
I think, to be honest, you know, it's probably not changed over time, but I've always been a sucker for networking, getting people talking, putting people in touch with people that they can enjoy stuff with.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's that fundamentally sport is hugely, but I don't watch a lot of sport and I don't play a lot of sport. But you know, sport is something that I feel is incredibly useful to a lot of people in terms of bringing them together. And I think it's that kind of we did Facebook, and then Facebook just turned into this kind of way of people blaring viral tat at each other.
That's a standing quote.
It's getting harder and harder to see any real value in it. You kind of go and look at it, and I don't know about other people, but I'm kind of looking at it going like, I can see this rubbish anywhere, and I'd rather not. But one of the things with sport is that if there's participation, then there's an actual event. You're taking it offline, you're including it more in your real life. Even if it's not, then there's something that people are genuinely interested in seeing, and at least in an armchair point of view, participating in, which kind of exists outside of the computer. It's not a meme. It's not a
yeah, you can't do it on the cloud or on your screen effectively. You actually interact in real time. So, yeah. Have other questions at the moment, or I'll keep going? Another thing that I was quite interested to ask you about is, as you expand your team, what's your thoughts on, like, Paul Graham introduced the idea, or I don't know if it was him that necessarily introduced it, the idea of like maker time and having a team of software developers, working very different timescales than perhaps a team manager where you can just pop a meeting here, a meeting there, whereas as a developer it's nice to have a full afternoon or a full day to just put your head down and get pro into code.
So actually, Paul Graham, Maker Time, that's going back a little while.
2009, I think.
Yeah, I think we were kind of looking at that when we were getting started, and it was always kind of whether I was using it as an excuse or not.
I don't want to talk to you. This is my Maker Time.
Well, it's that kind of at that stage in my life, I very much preferred starting work at 11 and was quite happy to still be writing code at 3 in the morning. And actually being able to justify it by saying it's important for me not to be on the same time zone as you guys is perhaps good. But I think as a developer, yes, those chunks of uninterrupted time are valuable. I'm not convinced they're as valuable as perhaps they've become seen as.
Okay, interesting.
So if you go for a somewhat more recent view of it, there's the concept of flow, where things are much more measured on that kind of. People don't achieve anything if they're interrupted, and people come up with these models of a 5-minute interruption actually loses you an hour's time.
Yes.
And if you're really in the zone, sometimes that's kind of true, but actually most of the time it's bullshit. A lot of times people are actually in the zone on something that's not useful, that they shouldn't be doing. 5 seconds with somebody else would give them the space to think, what the hell am I at? And I think a lot of the rest of the time, you can get all the interrupted space in the world, but actually all you're going to do is sit there browsing crap. I'm completely obsessed with politics Twitter at the minute.
Well, it's an interesting time to be obsessed with it, yeah.
But I'm losing half my life to it.
So, it's like our cameraman in the back is having a lot of fun with it as well. I see many pictures making fun of our current situation as he sits there as an Austrian, thoroughly happy, well, not happy, obviously not, but laughing at our situation.
Yeah, I feel in many ways it is a better time to not be here. But yeah, it's that kind of there's value to it. But even going back further to when I was just out of uni, Asda, who I interviewed with for some crap job, had this concept of there was a hat, and you were allowed to wear your hat for a certain amount of the day, and when you were wearing a hat, nobody was allowed to interrupt you. And it was your quiet space to get on with some shit. Okay. And I like that, but what I like about that is, it's not kind of paying homage to, it's not worship of this concept. I think flow goes with a lot of notions that developers are these singular geniuses, the smartest person in the room, and you've got to bow down or suck up to them or whatever. And I don't think that's a good relationship for anybody. So you know, basically what I'm saying is, if I organise a stand-up, people had better bloody come to
Rich, you got a question?
Yeah, so I have another question on investment. I mean, I think I've understood that despite the fact that FanDuel was a unicorn at some point, these initial investors like Ian, and I think even the founders, left and made no money out of this deal. Firstly, is that true? Secondly, why did it happen? And thirdly, what, in your opinion, could have been done to avoid that?
So I would say that the exit phase didn't go as we'd have liked. I can't really talk any more about it.
Or is it your NDA and all that stuff? Yeah.
Well, you know, it's just.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I would love to. Someday
If I have a
there will be a
coffee
story
with
to
you,
be
you
told.
tell me.
That's not right now.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately. Do you have another question at the moment? If not, like, what would you say is a valid, for whenever you're building a team and stuff, what would you say is a valid, like, say you're a few guys with an idea and you want to bring on a technical co-founder, how would you say is a valid equity split at that point? Is it you kind of say, hey, you know, here's 2% kind of thing? And what would you say is a valid sort of expectation for if you're coming in as a technical lead in a team?
I mean, to some extent, it depends on when you're coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people always offer too low and often accept too low.
Mm.
I've actually heard one of the larger investors say that he doesn't look at companies unless there's a technical co-founder on, you know, more or less 50%. Because his feeling on it is that they haven't got the buy-in from the people they need at that stage.
So when you say 50%, do you mean 50% of the equity, or what do you mean 50%?
Well, 50% of the founder equity. So
Of the founder.
yeah, they would have to be the dominant
No,
person.
no, I get. Yeah, I just wasn't sure what you meant.
Mark Zuckerberg's and
But yeah, I mean, that's possibly overstating it. But I think a mistake a lot of people make in first starting up is overvaluing their idea, and actually, I don't want to say the idea is worth fuck all, but you know, the idea that made big for us was the 20th iteration on the third big idea. So it's not unique. Somebody else has had it before. The person you're talking to may well have heard it before. They're looking to you as a non-technical co-founder to demonstrate that you're bringing something to the table, and that something is going to be a lot of commitment, a lot of drive, and the ability to go out and get the money, and stop them having to worry about it. I mean, I'm probably more interested in finance than almost any other technical co-founder I've seen, and I'm not interested in finance. So, you know, at the end of the day, you need a realistic idea. The idea is perhaps not worth nothing, but don't think of it as being worth more than 5% ever. You need to be bringing something to the table, and you need a good sense of the value of what you're bringing to the table. And if you don't know what you're bringing to the table, then find out before you start down the journey. You know, read up and figure out what you might be good at. But then once you've done that, it fundamentally comes down to what are you getting in the technical co-founder, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of relatively inexperienced technical people there as well. So if they are not going to run a course, if they're just going to turn out to be not as technically able as perhaps you assumed, then actually giving them 10% doesn't help, because you've still got an inconveniently placed 10% on your books when they leave, you've really got to figure out, and if they're not worth a significant investment, then don't work with them. You can do a lot now with agencies. So the caveat to saying that you've got to have a technical co-founder and they're well funded is you can get a long way in proof of concept with agencies, and once you've done that, then you'll have a bit more technical idea what you want. You'll have proved the idea. The idea fundamentally has got a bit more value then, and you will have a bit more confidence that you've done some fundraising and everything else. So basically, that can be a good time to bring people on, but if you don't think they're worth a significant chunk of the company, then are they somebody you want to work with?
All right, do we have any final questions before we wrap up? Good. In that case, as I say, we'll wrap up just now. At the moment, obviously, the night will continue for another hour, for 45 minutes, an hour or so. If you have any more questions for Chris, or if you just want to like me and munch yourself, we still have beers and drinks and maybe a little bit of pizza left. Only's eating. So, yeah, thank you very, very much for coming along. Thank you again to CMS for hosting this, and thank you to Heroku for making it so possible as well. And yeah, thank you for coming.